Masechet Horayot Daf He. The Mishnah teaches Horu betin ve'asu kol hakahal o ruban al pihem mevi'in par. Uba avodah zara mevi'in par v'sa'ir dibre Rabbi Meir. We're going to see a few different opinions by the Tanaim in this Mishnah about how many parim are brought and who brings them. So, a typical case of the betin that gives an erroneous ruling. This is the Sanhedrin of all of Israel, gives a ruling that is wrong, and all of Israel follows that ruling and sins, or a majority of the people, of the population. In that case, the Bet Din, the judges themselves, have to bring one par. All the judges together bring one par. And if they give an erroneous ruling regarding avodah zarah, then they have to add not only the par, but also a sa'ir. That is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that the judges alone are responsible for bringing the par, or the par and sa'ir. After all, they're the ones that made the mistake, gave the mistake in ruling. However, there's another opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shenem asar shevatim mebi'in shenem asar parim, u'ba'avodah zarah mebi'im shenem asar parim, u'shnem asar se'irim. Rabbi Yehuda says, assuming that all 12 tribes followed the ruling of the Sanhedrin, the erroneous ruling, then you know who brings it? Not the judges, but rather the heads of the Shevatim. Each Shevet has to bring one par, so that if all 12 Shevatim sinned, then altogether you're going to have 12 parim. It's true that the Bet Din is the one that issued the erroneous ruling, but it's the people that followed the ruling and made the mistake in sinning. So each individual does not have to bring their own korban hatat of a se'irah, but rather the shevet, the representatives of the whole tribe, bring a par for the sin of that tribe, the people, the ones that sinned, and so the leadership brings it on their behalf. And if it's avodah zarah, then you'll have altogether 12 parim and 12 se'irim. That's the second opinion. Third opinion, Rabbi Shimon Omer, shelosha asar parim, uba avodah zarah shelosha asar parim, ushlosha asar se'irim, par v'sa'ir l'chol shebet v'shebet, par v'sa'ir lebet din. Rabbi Shimon, this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The sages in this Mishnah are all the students of Rabbi Akiva, including Rabbi Meir, the prime student, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eli, the fourth generation. They're all fourth generation, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he says 13 parim, and if it's avodah zarah, 13 parim and 13 se'irim. How did he get that? Well, he agrees actually with both. He's adding together Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda together, and thinks that the judges have to bring a par, and also each of the shevatim. And so that's how he gets 13 par v'sa'ir, one for each shevet, that's 12, and also a par and sa'ir for the Bet Din. Horu Bet Din ve'asu shiba shevatim, oruban al pihem, mevi'in par, uba avodah zarah mevi'in par v'sa'ir dibre Rabbi Meir. Okay, so we concluded case number 1, and we saw the 3 different opinions about that. But now we have another case, and we'll see all the different opinions about this case. Here, the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin of all of Israel, gave an erroneous ruling, but this time 7 of the 12 Shevatim followed the ruling and sinned. The other 5 did not. Or a majority, but not everybody, followed this ruling. In that case, the judges, again, have to bring a par, and if it's avodah zarah, then the judges bring a par and a sa'ir, according to the Rabbi Meir. So according to the Rabbi Meir, it makes no difference if it's the majority of 7 or all shevatim. It's going to be one par, because it's the judges that bring it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shiba shebatim shechatu mebi'in shib'a parim, usha shebatim shelo chatu mebi'in al yedehen par, shaf elu shelo chatu mebi'in al yedeh chotin. Rabbi Yehuda says, the 7 tribes that sin violated unknowingly following the erroneous ruling, they each bring one par, so that's going to be 7 parim. And the other shevatim, although they did not sin, they also each have to bring a par. Even though they didn't sin, they're part of the collective, and once the majority of tribes sinned, so then everybody brings a par. Rabbi Shimon Omer Shemona parim uba'avodah zara Shemona parim u'shmona sa'irim. Par v'sa'ir l'chol shevet v'shevet, par v'sa'ir lebet din. Rabbi Shimon says, if 7 tribes sinned, then you bring 8 parim, and if it's avodah zara, 8 parim and 8 sa'irim. How do you get to that? Well, he says 1 pad and 1 sa'ir if it's avodah zarah for each tribe, and that's 7 tribes that sinned, plus 1 for the bet din itself. That will cover their sin in giving a false ruling, and so you get 8 altogether. And so the various opinions are consistent in applying their principles of 12 also to a case of 7. הרו בית דין של אחד מן השבטים ועשה אותו השבט על פיהן, אותו שבט הוא חייב, ושאר כל השבטים פטורים. דברי רבי יהודה. Now, a third different case in the Mishnah is it's not the Sanhedrin of all of Israel that made a false ruling, but rather a bet din of one of the tribes. Just like we have a federal Supreme Court for the whole country, we also have state Supreme Courts. So if the Supreme Court of one tribe made an error and that tribe followed the error, then only that tribe has to bring a par, and the other tribes do not, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Hachamim omerim en chayvin ela al horayot betin hagadol bilbad shene'emar v'im kol adat Yisrael yishku v'lo adat oto shebet. Hachamim, however, say no. In that case, when the Bet Din, the highest court of the tribe, makes an erroneous ruling, and they follow their tribe follows it, nobody brings any pad because the law of Horayot, of the Pad He'elim Davar Shel Sibur, only applies to the Bet Din Hagadol, the national Supreme Court. As the Pasuk says, if all of the congregation should make a sin, only if it applies to all the congregation, the national Supreme Court, and not just a ruling by one tribe that would only apply to the members of that tribe. תנו רבנן, ידעו שהורו וטעו מה הורו, יכול יהיו חייבים, תמוד לומר ונודע חטאת ולא שיוודעו החוטאים. Braita introduces a new case where the Bet Din knows that they made a mistake, but that's Yadu Shehoru, but they're not sure what they made a mistake about. For example, they made a ruling earlier in the day that chelib is permitted. The people went ahead and they ate the prohibited chelib. They also ate blood. Later in the day, they realized they made a mistake because they see the people, they're eating blood and chelib, but they forgot, they're not sure, did we make a ruling about chelib or did we make a ruling about blood? The people are making both sins, but they're not sure which one they issued a ruling about. So in that case, would they be liable when they're not sure? And the answer is no, because the Pasuk says, V'node'ah ha'chatat, the sin became known and not the sinners. We know the sinners, in other words, we know that the judges, they made a ruling that's mistaken, so they caused a sin. So yes, we know they are sinners, but we don't know what sin they did. And so the Pasuk, we could look at it inside, here, V'node'ah hatat asher hatu aleha, if the sin that they made becomes known, so you see that the sin becomes known, they have to know precisely which ruling that they made was the wrong one. And now, asher hatu, the continuation of that phrase, that they sinned, hatu shene shebatim mebi'in shene parim, hatu shelosha mebi'in shelosha, o eno omer ela, hatu shene yichidim mebi'in shene parim, hatu shelosha mebi'in shelosha. So that they sinned, let's analyze this phrase. If 2 tribes sinned, they bring 2 parim. If 3 tribes sinned, then they bring 3 parim. So that's the halacha. But now the midrash halacha, its usual format is, then it's going to ask the opposite hypothesis to see if we can sustain that. Is that what it means? That the whole shevet brings just 1 pad for the whole shevet? Or maybe asher chatu means those that sinned. If 2 individuals sinned following the erroneous ruling, then each of them brings a pod. If it's 3, each of them brings a pod. Maybe every single individual has to bring a pod because it's a national sin. So if it was 100 individuals that followed their own mistake, they would bring 100 small animals. But if it's because of a national mistake by a ruling of the Beit Din, then each of those 100 individuals has to each bring a pod. Maybe you could read it that way, Asher Chatu, because it says the people who sinned. So is it referring to the people? And so we say, no, it can't be that. Tamod Omar HaKahal, the continuation of that same pasuk here says, Ve'ekribu HaKahal par ben bakar lechatat ve'bi'oto lifnei ohel moed. So you see, it's the whole community, meaning the whole tribe brings one pod, not the individuals. And we explain further, HaKahal chayav, ve'chol kahal ve'kahal chayav. So the congregation is liable, and in fact, each congregation is liable. We're taking congregation here to mean the shevet. Kesad, chatu shene shevatim mebi'in shene parim, chatu shiba mebi'im shiba, ush'ar shevatim shelo chatu mebi'in al yedehen par, she'afilu elu shelo chatu mebi'in al yedeh hachot'in. Lechach ne'emar, kahal, lechayev al kol kahal ve'kahal, dibrer bi-Yehuda. So, how does this work? So every single kahal has to bring is liable. If 2 shevatim sinned, then they bring 2 parim. If 7 shevatim sinned, they bring 7 parim, and the rest of them, of the tribes that did not sin, they each have to bring a pod, because even the ones that didn't sin, they have to bring a pod lechatat on behalf of those that did sin. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh, so they are guarantors, and it's already a majority. But we are going to come and join in and bringing a pod. So that's why it says kahal lechayev, to make everybody liable. The Gemara later on will explain how he's learning multiple things from kahal. We're going to explain that Rabbi Yehuda, it says the word kahal twice. Once in this pasuk hakahal, and again in the previous pasuk me'aneh hakahal, and each of them has a heyediah. So Rabbi Yehuda is going to say, so this is 2, and this counts as 2 things that you could learn from it, because kahal and hakahal. So we'll see exactly what Rabbi Yehuda does with each of those, but that's Rabbi Yehuda's understanding that those who sinned and those who don't sin are going to bring a pod, and so that's how you get 12. Even if not all of the Shevatim sinned. The Braita continues, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shiba Shevatim shechatu mebi'in Shiba parim, ubetin mebi'in al yedehen par, shene'emar lemata kahal, v'ne'emar lemala kahal, ma kahal amur lema'ala betin im hakahal, af kahal amur lemata betin im hakahal. Rabbi Shimon says, if 7 tribes sinned, then those 7 tribes each bring 1 pod for a total of 7. And the Beit Din also brings a pod, so you're going to end up having 8. How did Rabbi Shimon get that? It says the word kahal below, and it says the word kahal above. The below is referring to this pasuk, ve'ikribu hakahal, and the one above is here, me'aneh hakahal. So since they're back to back, it makes sense that we should connect them and say it's referring to the same thing. So the one above, when it says me'aneh hakahal, that's talking about the Beit Din. All right, certainly that's the Beit Din together with the people. The aneh hakahal means the eyes, the leaders, the judges of the congregation. So if there it means the judges of the congregation, and so the judges are included as part of the congregation, so too the next pasuk where it talks about bringing the sacrifice, hakahal has to include the judges, and therefore the judges have to bring 1 pod, and each of the tribes that sinned also bring 1 pod. Rabbi Shimon does not say that the other tribes who didn't sin have to bring a pod. It seems to be like an either or. Either the judges are the ones doing it for the whole nation, or all the other tribes are even though they didn't sin, are doing it on behalf, and so that's how you get the national repentance. Rabbi Meir Omer, Shiba Shevatim shechatu, Beit Din mebi'in aydehen par vehem peturim. Ne'mar kahal lemata v'ne'mar kahal lema'ala. Ma kahal hamur lema'ala Beit Din velo sibur, af kahal hamur lemata Beit Din velo sibur. Rabbi Meir says, if 7 tribes sinned, then the Beit Din brings only 1 pod, and the tribes themselves do not bring anything. That's Rabbi Meir. And how does he know that? Because, again, it says kahal. in the second pasuk, pasuk 14, about bringing a sacrifice, and it says in the previous pasuk, me'aineha kahal. So just like kahal, that's said in the first pasuk, is talking about the bet din, and he understands it as talking about the bet din only. Me'aineha kahal is referring to the judges themselves, and not the public. They're the ones that issued the erroneous ruling. So too, kahal, that said regarding giving the sacrifice, is referring to bet din alone. The judges all bring one pod, and the shevatim do not bring anything at all. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer Mishemo. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar has a statement in the name of Rabbi Meir. This is also Rabbi Meir, but this is Rabbi Meir as explained by the Chachamim. And now we have Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar himself. He explains a law about from Rabbi Meir. Chatu shisha shebatim v'hem rubo shel kahal. O shiba af al pi she'eno rubo shel kahal mevi'in par. If even just 6 shevatim sin, but they are majority by population, then the bet din has to bring a par. Or if it's 7, even if they are not the majority of the population, they also have to bring a par. So either of those two cases counts towards the 7, not just literally 7. Without Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, it seems that it has to be 7 and not 6. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying 7 or majority, not 7 and majority, and not 7 alone. Amar Mor. That's the end of the Baraita. Now we're going to go back and analyze the various sections of the Baraita. It says V'node'ah hachatat v'lo shivadeu hachotim mantana. Beginning of the Baraita says only if the actual erroneous ruling that the bet din made becomes known, and they know specifically which ruling, which law that they said is wrong, then they bring korban. But if they made a number of rulings that day, and they know that one of them was wrong, but they don't know which one, then they do not bring a parelim davar shel sibur, because it says if the sin is known, not if the sinners are known. Mantana, who is the author of this part of the Baraita? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Item Ravad Dela Kerebi Eliezer Titnan Amar Rabbi Eliezer Man Nafshach Im Cheleb Achal Chayab Notar Achal Chayab. This part of the Baraita must not be like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says that in a case where this is a Baraita, where you have in front of someone some cheleb, one piece, and another piece of meat is notar. Both of them are prohibited, and he eats one of them, but he's not sure which one he ate. Now they're both prohibited. He has to bring a korban hatat either way. Does he bring a korban hatat? Rabbi Eliezer says yes, because manafshach. Either way, if he ate chaleb, he's going to have to bring a korban hatat. If he ate a notar piece of meat, he's going to have to bring a korban hatat, and therefore he brings it no matter what. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The other sages say, no, in order to bring a korban hatat, you have to know precisely which sin you made. And here you don't know. You violated something, but you don't know which sin it is. So you do not bring a korban hatat. This baraita that says that they have to know which sin they made a mistake about, the bet din, they made a mistake about something, but they don't know what the matter is that they made a mistake about. They forgot. Well, that would go with Chachamim against Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it doesn't matter. And so Rabbi Eliezer might say that just like in this case of an individual where he has 2 pieces of meat, and if he has to bring a korban either way, so he brings a korban. He might say regarding the judges, also, if they know they made a mistake, what does it matter which mistake they made? They made a mistake, and majority of the people did that sin, so following whatever, their error, whichever one it was, and therefore the bet din should have to bring a par, because they're liable to bring a par no matter what. So isn't that true, that this Rabbi Eliezer is not the author of this baraita? Rav Ashi Amar afilu tema Rabbi Eliezer shane hachatichti bashir hateu aleha. Rav Ashi says, no, it can be that even this baraita is Rabbi Eliezer, because it's different regarding the parelim davar shel sibur. It says the extra words, the sin that they did. The sin that they sinned became known. So that's a particular sin that they have to know which issue they made a mistake in ruling about. So that's why even Rabbi Eliezer would say, in that case, you have to know which one it is. And so otherwise they would not be liable to a par. We reject that. Hatam name ketiv asher hataba. Wait, but regarding an individual korban hatat later in the perek, it also says the sin that he sinned in. That's a similar phrase. So that would sound like that's if you're going to interpret this pasuk that to mean he has to know which one it is. This also then would be he has to know precisely which one it is. And the Eliezer evidently does not say asher hatabi means he has to know the particular sin. So up here also he would not interpret the pasuk this way. And the answer is hahumi ba'ele perat mitasek. No, this asher hataba is used for something else. That's coming to exclude someone who does something without awareness at all. There's a difference between a mistake. That's someone who, I know that I'm eating a piece of meat. I'm doing an act intentionally. It's just that I thought it was kosher and it's actually not kosher. Mitasek is someone who's not even doing the act. He's just walking. He doesn't even realize what's going on. And while he's walking, he trips a tripwire that goes and kills someone. He's just walking. He wasn't even meaning to throw something at someone that maybe it would kill him. Maybe it was not. He was mistaken. I thought it was an animal. It was a person. Mitasek means he wasn't even intending to do that action at all, that he became liable. Asher hataba means he has to have some awareness, and then he was just negligent about knowing what the law is or what the status of the thing was. Since we need that to teach another law, it's not available to teach us that you need that particular thing, and therefore Rav Ashi is correct. This beraita can be to be Eliezer, because even though regarding an individual korban, it doesn't matter if you ate something notar or chaleb, then you have to bring a korban, because either way. But regarding the Sanhedrin, says asher chatu aleha. We don't use this phrase for anything else. And therefore, this phrase may very well come to teach us that they have to know which issue they made a mistaken ruling about. Now, back. My Talmud Rabbi Yehuda. Back to the Mishnah and the Baraita that gave the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says that even if one tribe sinned, they have to bring a korban. That one tribe has to bring a korban. What's their source? Kasabar arba'a kahale ketibi. Kahal hakahal, kahal hakahal. It says kahal 4 times. Actually, it's only twice, but each one has a heyidiyah. So from the first kahal and the heyidiyah, and the second kahal and the heyidiyah, we're going to learn 4 things altogether. What are the 4 things? Number 1, that if any tribe that sinned has to bring their own korban. That's 1. Second, a general rule that the mistaken ruling has to be done by the Bet Din, and the act of sinning has to be done by the congregation. It's not sufficient if the judges give a mistaken ruling and only the judges follow that ruling and eat that chaleb. They do not bring a par. That's not sufficient. You need the ruling by the judges and the action by the people. Third, chad le girira. Girira means that we draw in all the other tribes. If 7 of the tribes sinned, they bring a korban each for their own sin, and the 5 other tribes who didn't sin also bring a par each on behalf of the entire congregation. That's the girira. And another one for an individual shevet where their local bet din, the bet din of that shevet, made a mistaken ruling. That shevet has to bring a par, not the others, but that shevet does. That's what we learned. That's the 4th thing that we learn. So here we have a source for all of the things that Rabbi Yehuda says. But Rabbi Shimon, now how is Rabbi Shimon going to learn his law that they bring 7 bulls and the court also brings 1? So 8. So you always need whichever Shevatim sinned, and plus 1 for the judges. Telata kehale ketibe hakahal kahal hakahal me'ane kahal orche dikrahu kedamri inashe me'ane diflania. He only has 3 times hakahal. The one hakahal is in the first pasuk, the heyidiyah, and the second pasuk kahal and hakahal. The first, just plain word, kahal, he does not learn from, because that's the way of speaking. People say from the eyes of so-and-so, meaning from their leadership, from their perspective. And so therefore the aineh, you can't just say aineh nothing. You have to need kahal just for the normal phrasing. So you can't learn anything extra from that. And therefore you only have ha-kahal, kahal, and ha-kahal. So now already you're learning only 3 things. Number 1, any tribe that sins, they have to bring their own par. That's 1. It says kahal in the second pasuk. It also says kahal in the first pasuk. So just like in the first pasuk, it means the bet din along with the kahal. So too here means the bet din along with the kahal, and therefore when the how many parim do we bring? If it's 7, so all 7 tribes are going to have to bring plus 1. That's the extra one. That's according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir. Kahal hakahal la darish. Rabbi Meir does not learn anything from the extra ha'yedi'ah. That's just the normal language. And therefore, he only has 2 words to learn something from. Hilkach tere kehale ketibe. Mibale le'nemar lemata kahal, v'nemar lema'la kahal, ma lehalan betin velo sibor, afkan betin velo sibor. It says in the second pasuk kahal, and it says in the pasuk before that also kahal. So just like in the pasuk before that, it's referring to the bet din alone. Me'aneh kahal. That's the bet din. So if they're the ones that made the issue the wrong ruling, so too the next pasuk that talks about bringing the korban, who brings it? Only hakahal, only the judges. So the judges only the judges bring 1 pod, and the Shevatim don't bring a pod. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, my ta'ama. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, he said, if it's 6 tribes but the majority of population, or if it's 7 tribes, even the minority of the population, in that case, still the Bet Din brings a pod. How does he know that? Ketib. From the mem, if from among the leaders of the congregation. So that means a minority. Dichtib me Uchtiv ki lechol ha'am bishkaga lememra deruba'in miutala. But there's another pasuk that says all of the people acted unwittingly. This pasuk is from Bimidbar. We can look at it here. It's talking about a similar law. The rabbis say that this is talking about when the judges make a mistake in ruling regarding idolatry. And so it says here, so you see here, it's not like what the other pasuk that we were talking about in Vayikra. Here, they made a mistake, but it's a pod and a sa'ir. So why the extra sa'ir? Must be that this is for the sin of idolatry. And it goes on and explains, because the entire people made an error. How could the entire people, all of a sudden, everybody made the same exact mistake? No, it means that the judges issued an error. So here it says, L'chol ha'am. Now, you could say a majority, it counts as the whole, but this would need a majority, and we can infer from here that a majority, yes, then you have to bring a pod and sa'ir, but if it's a minority, then not. Now, you have 2 different pesukim. One says me'aineh, which means a minority. One says l'chol ha'am, which means a majority. Hakesad, how do we understand this? Asu shisha vehen rubo shel kahal o shiva afa pisha enan rubo shel kahal chayavin. So we learn one thing from each of these contexts. If it's 6 of the tribes, that's a minority of tribes. But as long as it's the majority in terms of population, they bring a pod. Or 7, which is a majority of tribes, then even if it's not a majority of the population, they also bring. So each of these cases is, in one sense, a majority, in another sense, a minority. So that's parallel to the Pisukim that we brought, where the Pisukim also reflect both a majority and a minority. It'd be, if it's totally minority of Shivatim and minority population, then certainly they would not bring it. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Meir, now has Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir learned the rule that you only bring a pod helem dabar shel sibur, if it's the bet din that made the ruling, but the people that did the action and followed the ruling and sinned. We had for the Yehuda, he has 4 times kahal, so one of them he used for this. But Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, they don't have 4 times kahal, so where are they going to learn this rule? They agree with the rule. אמר אביי דאמר קרא, והיה אם מעיני העדה נעשתה לשגגה, רבה אמר מי לכל העם בשגגה. Abaye says we'll learn it from the pasuk in Bemidbar that says, אם מעיני העדה ne'esta lishkaga. So the Edah, they are the ones that are doing it by mistake. So there you go. Ha'edah lishkaga, the people are doing it. Rava says, no. Also from that context in Bamidbar, 2 Pesukim later, it says, L'chol ha'am bishkaga, what we just quoted, that all the people did an action. Either way, you need the people to do the action. Now you'll ask, why do I need 2 Pesukim? You could learn from either one. Usricha dikata bracha mana v'haya im me'ayneh ha'edah lishkaga hava mina afilu mi'uta. If you just said me'ayneh, from among the people, there was something that was done, I would have said maybe even a minority of the people. That's why it says all the people. It said all the people. I would think maybe that comes to include the betin themselves, that they also have to eat the cheleb, because they're included in the majority. They have to be included in the majority. That's why I need other pasuk to say, to give a limitation, to say, no, you don't need the judges to be the ones that sinned. So even if, as long as the judges gave the ruling, even if they didn't eat themselves, but the majority of the people ate, then they would bring someone would bring a korban. Now we ask, wait, these pesukim from Bamidbar are talking about avodah zarah. They're not talking about all other sins. So how do you know this is true for other sins? And the answer is yafinan me'ayneh me'ayneh. It says the word me'ayneh both in the Vayikra context and the Bamidbar context. So we can make a gezerah shava that whatever applies in one also applies to the other. Horu betin shel echad. The continuation of the Mishnah teaches that according to the Yehuda, if a tribal high court issues a mistaken ruling and that tribe follows that mistaken ruling, then only that tribe brings a korban and the other tribes do not. Now we have a follow-up question. What if the betin hagadol of the whole nation, right, the Supreme Court of the whole nation, made a mistaken ruling, and only one shevet followed that ruling? According to the Yehuda, do the other 11 shevatim have to bring a pod or not? Here's the two sides. Mi amdinan shevatim hu demaitu she'al shevatim bahadaihu mishum di karuba aval had shevet ele karuba la or dilma lo shena. Do we say that it's only when 7 tribes follow the mistaken ruling, that's when the other 5 tribes also have to bring the a pod as girira, because you have a majority, so the minority will follow the majority. We only know that Rabbi Yehuda said that this law, in an example of 7 shevatim, he said, the other 5 have to bring a pod. So maybe it's only if it's 7 or more when you have the majority that sinned, so then the minority brings a pod also, each shevet. But if it's only 1 or less than 7, then because there's no majority, then the rest of the other tribes who did not sin do not bring anything. That's a possibility. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe when Rabbi Yehuda, he was just giving an example of 7, but really, even if only 1 tribe sinned, all the other tribes would have to bring a pod also on behalf of the one that sinned. Each one would have to bring it and still be 12. That's the question. Tashema, mahen mebi'in. Let's try to learn from a baraita that says, what do they bring? Now, this baraita doesn't say what case it's talking about. We have to try to figure it out. But it does say, par echad, Rabbi Shimon omer shene parim. Tanakama, we don't know who it is, says 1 pod, and Rabbi Shimon says 2 parim. Rabbi Shimon generally says, the shevet and plus 1 for the judge. So this plus 1 is going to be for the judge. But what is this case where there will be 1 pod that's brought? If it's a case where 7 shevatim made a sin, and it could be par echad would be for the judge, like would it be meir, but then Rabbi Shimon would say 8, because he would say each of the shevatim have to bring 7 plus the judge. There's another one, and he says only 2, so it can't be him. Ela dechata shevet echad, so it must be 1 shevet made a sin. B'mai I b'horad bet dino Rabbi Shimon lete. So this 1 tribe, who are they following? If they were following their own local shevet court, their own tribal court, well, according to the Rabbi Shimon, you don't bring anything. Rabbi Shimon said only if the high court, then someone brings, but you don't bring for a tribal court. Nobody brings. That was only the Rabbi Yehuda thinks that. So it can't be because of a tribal court mistake. Rather, it must be that the betin hagadol, they issued a ruling, and one tribe followed that ruling, and that would explain Rabbi Shimon. That Rabbi Shimon would say, one tribe brings a pod, and the judge brings the pod. That's two. Tanakama maneh. Now, who would be Tanakama? Rabbi Meir harubabae. Is it Rabbi Meir, and it's the judge that brings a pod? All the judges together bring one pod? No, because Rabbi Meir says, the judges only bring a pod if it's the majority of the people sinned. And here it's not the majority, it's only one shevet. So it can't be Rabbi Meir. Rather, Tanakama must be Rabbi Yehuda. And it's this case where exactly this, where the Betin Hagadol issued a mistake, and one shevet followed that, and Rabbi Yehuda says only that shevet brings, the other ones do not bring any korban, which means that Rabbi Yehuda would only say the other ones who didn't sin bring korban if it's at least 7 that did sin, then the 5 or less that didn't sin bring a korban, if it's the majority that sinned. But in this case, not. So this is a good answer to the question. We say not necessarily. Amre, hachab askinan, kegon shechatu shisha shebatim ven ruban shel kahal. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. It could be that this case that Braita was talking about is when 6 of the tribes sinned, but the 6 was a majority, and we're following Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. De Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, Mishemo, chatu shisha vehen rubo shel kahal, o shibav afa pi she'enan rubo shel kahal, mevi'in pad. We know already. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Meir, if the 6 tribes sinned, but they're the majority of the population, or 7, even if they're not the majority, then the Betin brings a pod. So the Tanakama, who says 1, could be talking about that case. If that's so, why would Rabbi Shimon say 2? Because Rabbi Shimon, if in fact it was 6, then he would say 6 plus 1 is 7 and not 2. That's a difficult question. She tries to figure that out. Maybe it's somewhat different here because it's not the majority of the population. So maybe Rabbi Shimon would say 2 in such a case. But anyway, that baraita is not a proof for our question. So let's try again. Tashema. Rabbi Yehuda omer shebet she'asa behora'at bet dino. אותו השבט חייב ושאר כל השבטים פטורין. ובהוראת בית דין הגדול, אפילו שאר השבטים חייבים שמאמינה. This Braita says explicitly the answer to our question at the end. Rabbi Yehuda says, if a tribe follows the mistaken ruling of its own tribal court, then that tribe has to bring a korban, and none of the other tribes have to. But if it was based on the Beit Din HaGadol, the national court made a mistake, then the other ones do have to bring, everybody has to bring. So it's always going to be 12 the parim, whether it's 1 shevet or 7 shevatim or 12 shevatim that sinned. Every shevet is always going to bring korban if the Beit Din HaGadol made an erroneous ruling. Amar Rav Asher matnitin name daika. Rav Asher says, our Mishnah, if you look carefully at the words, you can come to the same conclusion. Dekatane, ve'asa oto hashevet al pihem, oto hashevet chayab ushar kol shevatim peturim. Our Mishnah reads that if a tribal court makes an error, and that tribe follows that error and sins, then that tribe is liable to bring a korban, and the other tribes don't. Now, these extra words, why do you have to say, and the other tribes don't have to bring a korban? You already told me that tribe has to bring one. Just stop there, and then I would know that the other tribes don't have to bring one. דשאר שבטים פטורין, אבל בהורת בית דין הגדול, אפילו שאר שבטים חייבים שמאמינה. Rather, it must be that this is teaching us that if it's the tribal court that makes the mistake, that's the case where the other tribes do not have to bring, the other 11 tribes don't have to bring anything. But there's another case, which is when the national Supreme Court makes a mistake, then the other tribes do have to bring a korban. And so this is a good final proof to the question that we had about Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Another question. Shebet echad she'asa b'horat beit din hagadol l'Rabbi Shimon mi maiteh o la. The same case that we just asked. Now we ask about Rabbi Shimon. If one tribe follows the mistaken ruling of the Bet Din Hagadol, of the national Bet Din. According to Rabbi Shimon, does that one tribe bring a korban or not? We know Rabbi Shimon said if 7 Shevatim sin, then you bring 7 plus 1, each of those Shevatim, plus also the judges. But we only know that he said about 7. Would he say the same thing about 1? Tashema, mahen mevi'in par echad. Rabbi Shimon omer shne parim. Let's try to answer it from the same baraita that we were analyzing above, the baraita that doesn't give the case. It just says how many do they bring. Tanakama says 1, and Rabbi Shimon says 2. B'mayaskinan, what is this case? If it's that 7 tribes sinned, then why would Rabbi Shimon say 2? We know he says when 7 tribes sin, then you have to bring, each one brings, and the judges. That's 8. So it can't be that case. Rather, it must be a case where only 1 tribe sinned. And whose ruling did they not follow? Whose ruling did they follow? If it's just the tribal court, then Rabbi Shimon says if a tribal court makes a mistake, then they do not bring. Nobody brings a korban. In that case, only the national. Rather, it's the national court, and 1 tribe went ahead and sinned, then according to Rabbi Shimon, that's the case he must be talking about. And the tribe brings 1, and the judges bring 1. So the answer to the question would be yes. But we answer no. V'tizbera Tanakama maneh. This is not a proof, because who would Tanakama be that says 1? In this same case, is it Rabbi Meir, who generally says 1 that the judges bring, but he says only that the judges only bring if it's the majority of the nation, not if it's only 1 tribe. So it can't be him. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, he says all 12 tribes bring, even if that's what we established above. Even if only 1 tribe sins, all 12 tribes bring, so it wouldn't be 1, it'd be 12. Rather, this entire the Tanakama must be Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, as we mentioned before, who says that if it's 6 tribes, but it's the majority of the population, then you bring 1 korban. And therefore, if that's the case of talking about 6 tribes, and so this baraita is not talking about a case of 1 tribe, but rather 6 tribes. So therefore, we cannot learn anything from it about 1 tribe. Tashema. Let's try to answer this question from another baraita. Hachamim omrim leolam eno chayab ela al horat bet din hagadol. Hachamim say that the one is not liable unless the bet din hagadol is the one that makes a mistake, not a local bet din. Man chachamim ilem Rabbi Meir ubabae. Who is chachamim? If it's Rabbi Meir, we already know that Rabbi Meir says we need the majority of the whole nation. So certainly it would have to be the bet din hagadol. Ela lav Rabbi Shimon hi shma mina. Rather, it must be that this is referring to Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon says that 1 tribe that makes sins is liable to bring a korban, because that's otherwise why say this? It's only horat bet din hagadol. Even if it's a minority, that's the point. Could it be Meir would not require anything for a minority? So who would require something for a minority? Must be Rabbi Shimon. So there you go. Rabbi Shimon says, indeed, if it's 1 tribe that follows the mistaken ruling of Bet Din Hagadol, then that 1 tribe would bring a korban, plus the judges also would bring a korban. Now that we've established that both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rabbi Shimon, if even 1 tribe sins, they bring a par, we ask, how does Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon know that even 1 shevet will be called a kahal, such that the word kahal in the Pesukim can refer even to 1 tribe that sins and follows the Bet Din Hagadol. Ameri dichtib ve'amod Yoshavat b'kal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim b'Bet Hashem lifnei hachaser ha'chadasha. My chadasha. Pasuk says that Yehoshaphat stood in Kahal, so we have the congregation, and it's referring to Yehuda, only 1 tribe, and Yerushalayim in front of the new courtyard in the Bet HaMikdash. First we ask, Mai Chadasha, why is it called the new courtyard? Did they build a new courtyard? It's just 1 courtyard there. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shechideshu Devarim ve'amiru tibul yom, al yikanes v'machane leviyah. The answer is it's not a new courtyard, but rather there was a new law that they taught about the courtyard, that someone who was tameh in the morning, went to the mikveh during the day, but nightfall did not happen yet, that kind of person, etavul yom, cannot enter the area of the Leviyim. That's the new law. That's why it's called a chadasha. Anyway, the proof here is that it says kahal, even though it's referring just to Yehuda. So there you go. One tribe is called kahal. Matkif la Rav Acha bar Yaakov Mimai Dilma Shani Shem Tahava Me Binyamin. But Rav Acha bar Yaakov rejects this proof because how do you know? Maybe since it's Yerushalayim, Binyamin is also part of it. Yehuda and Binyamin are together, are the southern kingdom, and that's the Bet HaMikdash is on the border of Yehuda and Binyamin. So maybe it's referring to Binyamin also. Ela amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov dichtiv vayomer elai hineni mafrecha v'biticha untaticha likal ami v'gomer man it yelid le hahishata Binyamin shema'amina hachi kama rachamana mit yelid lachashta kahal acharina. Rather, Rav Acha bar Yaakov brings a proof from what Hashem told Yaakov Avinu, I am going to make you fruitful and multiply and make you a congregation of people. Now, who would be born to him after? Only Binyamin. So there you go. We can learn from here that Binyamin is one shevet, and one shevet is called a kahal. Isn't that a good proof? Amar le Rav Shabbat le Rav Kahana. Timah kamar le Rachamana lechi mit yelid lach Binyamin hu dehavu shenem asa shevatim de mit kariyat kahal. Rav Shabbat tells Rav Kahana, I don't know. I don't think this is a good proof because maybe Hashem was telling Yaakov as follows: once you give birth to Binyamin, then you'll be 12 tribes, and then you'll be called a kahal. If you have less than 12, it's not called a kahal. So may you be a kahal when you have Binyamin, but really you need all 12 to be a kahal. But Rav Kana told him back, you're trying to tell me that 12 is called a kahal, 11 is not called a kahal? We saw, according to everybody, a majority already is called a kahal. And so nobody would say that 11 is not called a kahal. And therefore, this reasoning does make sense. And therefore, the proof that we had from here is a good proof that Binyamin alone is called a kahal, and therefore any one tribe, in fact, is called a kahal, and that's the source for the Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon to say that even if one tribe sins, they do have to bring a par. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.